start by telling you a story. On the 29th of December 1972, this is a true story, Eastern Airlines plane that was 4 months old, Flight 401, flew from JFK Airport to New York City, Miami, Florida. It was a red-eye flight, and the flight was under Captain Robert Albin, who was 55 years old and had more than 29,700 hours flying experience. As Flight 401 approached Miami Airport at 11:30 at night on a pitch-black, no-moon night, the captain dropped the landing gear ready to land the plane in Miami. As the pilot did that, the little indicator light, a little green indicator light that was on the cockpit dash of all the different lights, the one that says that the landing gear is down and locked into position, did not light up. The flight crew obviously saw this little light not light up, and got into a bit of a panic. And so the 13 crew, captain and the other 12, started to work out if the landing gear was in fact down and locked in position or not. And so for the next 30 minutes after talking to the tower and actually flying the plane and that, they were trying to work out if this was going to happen. Eventually, the captain says, look, I'm going to put it into autopilot. We're going to get down into the bottom of the plane at 2,000 feet. We'll get autopilot going. We'll get down into the bottom. We'll see if we can see out the plane and if this landing gear is actually down and in the locked position. Just before midnight that same night, Flight 401, a plane that was 4 months old, crashed into the Miami Everglades. What was happening was the autopilot was kicked in, but it was descending very, very slowly. And nobody of the 12 or 13 crew knew that the plane was actually descending. Plane crash investigators then searched the wreckage and found out that the landing gear was in fact down. The $5 light bulb that lit up in the cockpit had blown. It proves and highlights to us today that a seemingly small thing can cause a whole world of pain. Unfortunately, this flight, only 75 people survived back in 1972. But this $5 little light bulb that had blown had caused all this trouble. Proving big problems can come from small, little, what we think is irrelevant things. If you're joining us online, a very special welcome to you on demand, on podcast, via YouTube. Welcome to the SouthWest Salvos. A bit of a grim way to start this week, but we're in week 4 of our series on Samson, and we're looking at the last chapter of his life. We're looking at the end, so to speak, of his story, and we're going to start it this week and finish it next week. There was just way too much to cover in 1 week, and so we're going to start it this week and finish it next week. But for now, let's watch the sermon bumper and then get into what God has for us today.
Get me the secret of his strength.
If you've got your Bibles, you can open them up to Judges chapter 16. We're going to start at verse 1. The title of my message today is based on that great theologian Britney Spears. Oops, I did it again. I fell for that girl, that paddle. No, I'm not going to keep singing. Nobody wants to hear that. But for those who've been tracking, we've been looking at this series, Samson, and he's made a number of mistakes, hasn't he? This superhero, this judge, the 12th judge that Israel actually had recorded in the book of Judges. There was actually 13 judges, but the 13th judge is Samuel, who's a judge and a prophet, so he's kind of not just a judge. So he's the last of the pure judges before Samuel does the crossover. And not a judge wearing black robes and proceeding in a courtroom, but a judge who was supposed to be risen up by God, set apart from God to lead the people of Israel out of captivity, out of oppression, and free them from what is going on. And if you remember, the whole book of Judges has this pattern, a pattern where the people of God did what was right in their own eyes, right? They just did whatever they thought was right, whatever they wanted to do, they just did that. Then God would allow a neighbouring nation to come in and take them captive and hold them, oppress them, and then the people of God would cry out to God, and then God would raise a judge. And this pattern had happened 12 times. Samson's the 12th judge for this to happen. But Samson's different because he was a Nazarite. He was dedicated to God before, or in the womb, before he was born. Does anybody remember the 3 things he couldn't do? Cut his hair. Wine, I heard somewhere over here. Touch dead things, yeah, go touch dead things, cut his hair, and wine. The 3, right? So Samson has this going on, but he makes some choices, doesn't he? He makes some little choices, insignificant choices, like a little $5 light bulb blowing up. And those little choices that he makes actually has a massive ramification. He didn't think they were that significant, but actually in the scheme of things and where his life ends up, it leads him down a path that is causing him some serious trouble. So let's look at this. Judges chapter 16, we're going to start at verse 1. Are you ready? Yep. Huh, that was quick down here. Everybody else ready? Yep. Great, here we go. Judges 16:1. One day Samson went to Gaza, and he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. That's exactly how it reads, is what actually happened. Gaza was the capital city at this point for Palestine. So 20 years have passed from chapter 15 to chapter 16, because right at the end of chapter 15 it says that Samson ruled or led the people for 20 years. So he's 20 years older now, and it looks like he hasn't learned anything in that 20 years. Because he's gone down to the capital city in Gaza, a place that he shouldn't have been in. That's the Palestine capital city. And he's met a girl there who's not even, it's just a prostitute. And he's gone to spend the night with her. So he's not learned anything in the 20 years between chapters 15 and chapters 16. And this is kind of what he does all his life. He has this, he's a he-man, a strong man, a he-man with a she problem. He keeps looking at women and going, that's what I want. And giving into his desires, giving into his lusts. I like her, I want her, so he decided to go in and horizontal line dance with her. There you go, Val. Horizontal line dance with her. This was not love. This was just pure pleasure, pure desires, pure lust. Samson had fallen away from the person that God raised him up to be. He was so far from where God raised him up to be that he was just like everybody else at this point in time. You know, his actions actually mirrored the actions of the Israelite people. He did what he wanted in his own eyes. The Israelite people were supposed to be the example set for the rest of the world, right? They were the people of God. They were meant to be the example to the world, the example to the neighbouring nations of what it looks like to have God as their leader, to have God as their God. They were supposed to set the example. For us today, because Samson was set apart, the Israelites were set apart, and the church today is set apart. You and I are set apart, are we not? 3 head nods and 1 yes or 2 yeses. We've been set apart for God. The question for us is, are we living in such a way that we are the example to the rest of the world or the rest of our community? To our families, to our friends who don't know Jesus, in the places we go to? Are we the example? Do people look at us and go, I want what he's got, I want what she's got? Or do they go, you're just like everybody else in our town, in our community, there's nothing different about you? If worshipping God looks like that and it looks exactly the same as everything else, why do it? They were meant to be the example. Jesus has come into our lives. He's changed us from the inside out. He's taken us from death to life, from wrong to right, from sin and shame to glory with him, and transformed us, bringing us into a place that are we living that way as an example for everyone else to see? That's the question for us today. Are we living that way? Because Samson, he just fell into the same sin. 20 years, he's doing the same thing. Same old, same old. I've done it for 20 years, I might as well just keep doing it. Significantly, what we think is insignificant, little light bulb, could actually open up the door to lead us down a path that is actually not right. Does that make sense? And this is what's happening here. This is what's happening here. He just did what he just did. Are we living in such a way that it's an example for those around us? Verse 2, the people of Gaza were told, Samson is here. So they went and surrounded the place and laid in wait for him all night and at the city gate. They did not make a move during the night, saying, at dawn we'll kill him. Verse 3, but Samson laid there until the middle of the night, about midnight. Then he got up and he took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with its 2 posts, and tore it loose, bar and all. He lifted them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Just so you know, the city gates and the posts, most commentators put it between 600 kilograms and 1,000 kilograms. That's your car easily. Because a car's about, 400 kilos, 500 kilos? So imagine lifting your car on your shoulders and just walking it up the hill. Doesn't sound like you could do it, but that's what Samson's just done. If not, 2 cars. And so he's just picked that up and moved it up the hill and dropped it there. But there's a bigger picture of happening underneath this. See, what Samson was trying to tell the Philistines at that point in time was that they're not safe. Because cities, right, had fortified walls and they had gates. Right? And all the gates, and the bigger your gate and the bigger your walls, the more fortified you felt, the safer you were. And because enemy would attack. And so what Samson's done is he's just gone and taken their gate and their post and just ripped it up and walked it up the hill, leaving a big hole for the enemy to come straight through and take them out. Samson's trying to tell them that they're not safe. Which is really interesting because his life, he's done exactly that. He left a hole where, because he kept going down to Gaza, he kept going down to Timnah, he kept looking at women he wasn't supposed to look at. He left this hole in his life thinking it was insignificant, and the enemy has attacked him every time in that one spot, because that was his weak link. Can I tell you that the enemy will attack our weak links? He'll get us that way every single time. He's dumb, but he's clever enough to know this much. He will attack you on your weakest point. See, Samson was trying to teach the Philistines, you've got no choice against me. You're weak against me. But actually, he's weak. Because he's opened and left a whole section out. We've got to be careful because the enemy will attack us in our weakest link. Which begs the question, those insignificant things that we think are okay here, right? That we think, oh, that's okay. That little compromise we make, that little light that, we think, oh, that's not going to matter too much. Well, actually, that might be the weak link that the enemy uses to come through your gates, to get to your life, to lead you down it. Does this make sense? See, little light can cause so much pain and heartache, and this is what happened. The gates got ripped open, and then all of a sudden, there's this hole, this gate, and the enemy will attack each and every time on our weakest point. We've got to be careful of these little insignificant things that we think are insignificant, but actually are important. Let's keep moving, otherwise we're not going to get there. Verse 4, sometime later, so some time has passed since all of this has happened now. He fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sherach, whose name was Delilah. Delilah means delicate, but determined, or flirtatious. And this is where, oops, he did it again. He looked at that girl. I should have written this down somewhere. I'm sure I could make something up. But he did it again. It doesn't say he talked to her at this point. He just saw her and went, I like what I see. I want this woman. And he fell in love. Well, It was probably lustful intentions with this Philistine girl. Again, he's in a place he's not supposed to be in. Timnah was a place he was not supposed to be in. Gaza was a place he was not supposed to be in. The city or the valley of Saraga is a place he's not supposed to. Position matters. He put himself in a position going, oh, it doesn't matter, this is going to be okay. But this little act leads him down paths that just lead him to trouble. Your position matters. He put himself in a place where that took him away from God, instead of in a place that took him towards God. Right? He shouldn't have been with this girl to start with. Verse 5, the rulers of the Philistines said to her, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so that we may tie him up and subdue him. Each of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. Okay. We know there's 5 rulers, roughly 5 rulers. That's the consensus with most commentators, is there's 5 rulers of the Philistines. So if they're going to give 1,100 shekels of silver, that is 5,500 shekels of silver, right? We know that a shekel is about 16 grams of silver. So in today's world, that's $86,000 for Delilah to try and find a secret of Samson. So not a bad payday. Get me a secret, and I'll give you 86,000. Actually, it's worse than that, because that's in today's world. Not the price of silver and what it was worth back then, right? It says, we know that 10 shekels of silver is about a year's wages back then. Silver was more valuable than gold back in this day and age, right? And so we know 10 shekels of silver is a year's wages. Let's say a year's wages in Australia is what, about 50,000? Let's average it there for argument's sake, because that's easy to do the math at 50,000, right? That's 27 million or $27.5 million is the equivalent now for Delilah to get this secret out of Samson. I don't know. If you want to know one of my secrets, if you give me 86,000, I'll go with that. I'll give you your secrets. 27.5 million, I'll tell you all my secrets. Like, come on. $27.5 million is offered to this woman to find out one secret. And so she fell in love, but not with Samson. She fell in love with the prospect of being mega rich. That's 550 years worth of wages back in this day and age. She takes up the offer. Verse 6, Delilah said to Samson, I feel like I need to say this in the girliest voice I've got, but my voice is shocking today. Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you may be tied up and subdued. Oh, that hurt. Verse 7, Samson answered, if anyone ties me up with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not dried, I'll become weak as any other man. If you want to know what they made bowstrings out of, it was basically the intestines of pigs, and then they would dry them out and then put them on bows. And useless information for you, but hey. Verse 8, then the rulers came to the Philistines, then the rulers of the Philistines bought the fresh 7 bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him up with them. Verse 9, when the men were hidden, she called out, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to the flame, so the secret of his strength was not discovered. This is where Samson should have ran away. Come on. Like, tell me the secret of your strength. Here's the secret. Oh, you've just done that to me. Like, wouldn't you just run at that point? Men, if this woman does this to you, run. But he doesn't run. Verse 10. You've made a fool out of me. You lied to me. Samson. Come now. Tell me how you may be tied. And again, Samson says to this girl through his lustful eyes, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man. Well, let's think about this. Tie him with new ropes. This is not the first time in this story he's been tied with new ropes. In the chapter before, remember when he's in the cave, right? And the men of Judea come and they grab him and say, look, we're going to tie you up and take you to the 1,000 Philistines. And then he gets the jawbone of the jawbone of a donkey and just takes out 1,000 guys. He's tied with new, fresh ropes. So we know that this is not going to work. But yet, he kind of puts it out there. He's toying now. He's playing with her. Maybe he did work out that the first time she kind of let the secret out. So he's having a bit of fun with this. So he does this. And so Delilah, this is verse 12, right? Took the new ropes and tied him with them. Then the men hidden in the room, she called out to them, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the ropes off his arms as they were threads. Samson, get out of there! Come on, man! No, he's still there. Idiot. When I get to heaven, I want to ask him, why did you stay? Like, come on, man, dude, why did you stay? Like, surely he's not this. Anyway, verse 13. Then Delilah said to Samson, all this time, this really is hurting my throat. All this time, you've been making a fool out of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can get tied. Come on, Samson, tell me. Come on, why won't you tell me, Samson? Come on, tell me. You can just picture this scene, can't you? He replied, if you weave the 7 braids of my head into fabric on a loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll become weak as any other man. Well, now he's getting close to the secret, isn't he? He's talking about his head. He's talking about his hair now. If you take the 7 and weave some stuff for fabric into my locks, my 7 long locks, then I'll become weak. This is dangerous territory. This little light that he shouldn't have done to start with we're starting to see this it's going to blow. It's going to crash. And so while he was sleeping, so in other words, he didn't even care that he had said something about his hair. He's gone to sleep. He's so blasé about it. Delilah took the 7 braids of his hair and wove it into some fabric, verse 14, and tightened it with a pin. And again she called to him, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom. Now he's beating these guys up with a loom stuck in the back of his head. At what point do you go, Samson, how dumb are you? Like, 3 times this woman has asked you for the secret of her strength. 3 times you've given her something, and 3 times they've done the very thing that you've told her. Clearly, this is where the information is going, right? And all I can think of is 1 or 2 possibilities of what's going on here. Firstly, Samson is as dumb as a doornail. All brawn, no brains. Me, on the other hand, all brains. Well, I got some fat. No. Maybe he isn't so, maybe. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know him personally. I'll get to heaven and I'll find out. Maybe he's as dumb as a doornail. Like, who knows? Or, and maybe this is the one that I think is more likely the case. He was so deep in his sin and his lust that he had no idea what was right and what was wrong, what was sinful and what was godly. I think that's more the case. So blinded by all of this, so deep in it, that he had no idea it was happening. And the effect was gradual for him over years. Remember when I said the light didn't light up? For 30 minutes, this plane was slowly descending. It was gradual. Nobody noticed it coming down because it was so gradual. And then eventually crashed. This is what's happening. It's a gradual, it's a slippery slope. Once we allow this little thing that we think is insignificant to happen, then the doorway is opened up. The gates are ripped off. The doorway is opened up. We're then primed, ready for the attack of the enemy. When the attack of the enemy comes, we slowly start to compromise, and we get to a place where we can't even see clearly anymore what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. And I think this is what's happening here. And it's his own desires, his own feelings that are clouding his judgment around all of this, what's right and wrong. Can I say, just quickly too, we live in a world where if you jump on social media, you talk to anyone, they are professional in their field. They know everything. My 15-year-old, well, he's 18 now, or almost 18, but when he was 15, he knew everything. I was going to send him to NASA and say, look at this kid, look how much he knows. Man, he's a freak of nature. He knows everything. But there are people out there that will say things and they believe it to be true. It's not, but they'll say it's true. And Google, you can go to Google and it will give you 7 different answers. Which one's true? Are they all true? Maybe someone says something on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Like, is it true? See, there is only one source of true truth. Can we make that a term, true truth? And that's Jesus Christ, yeah? Amen? Yeah. True truth. The only place that we can go to is the ink captured in the pages of the Bible, which is God's word. That is true truth. Right there. Regardless of what the world says. Regardless of what is happening. Regardless of how you feel, or the world feels, or how politically correct or incorrect it may be. Whatever it says is true. Full stop, end of story, next subject kind of deal. That is true truth. The only place we go to get it is true. The world will tell us all sorts of things. And don't get me wrong, we need to be living in this world, but not of this world. That's what separates us. Yeah? Remember, set apart to show them something different. We could be in this world, but not of this world. When Jesus came into our hearts, he gave us a new way of living. I'm a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. But Delilah had blinded him so much, and he couldn't see anymore what was right and what was wrong. This little insignificant thing of starting to go down to Timnah to watch a girl, to see this is what tracked it through. Verse 15. Then she said to him, how can you say you love me? How can you say I love you? When you won't confide in me, when you won't tell me, tell me. This is the 3rd time you made a fool of me. Don't you love me? Can't you tell me the secret of your great strength? Can you just imagine this? This is just, she didn't love him. She didn't care about him. She cared about money. $27.5 million worth of money. She didn't care about this or him. And then verse 16, with such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Isn't that the exact same thing that happened with his wife in Timnah? In fact, the scriptures say she vexed him to death. It means the same thing. Annoyed him so much that he eventually just went, you know what? This is the secret. Verse 17, she told him, no razor has ever been used on my head, he said, because I have been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as any other man. He has just given the secret to it all away. But his strength doesn't come from his hair, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't come from his hair. It comes from what it represents. His growing of the hair represented the fact that he had a commitment, that he was dedicated to God. The hair was just a symbol of it, a reminder. It's like this uniform that I'm wearing right now. It doesn't make me a Christian. In fact, far from it, it doesn't even make me an officer or a pastor. Doesn't have any power in it at all. It's a bit of clothing. It'll eventually fade and I'll have to buy another one. In 2 years, I get different things on my shoulders. So, it represents something, though, my dedication to God. It represents what I do for him. Does that make sense? His hair was a representation of Who gave him the strength? My God is so... My God is so big. It is him that gave the strength, not his hair. So even in that, he can't even see that it's God giving him the strength. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. That's how convinced she was of this. Verse 19, after putting him to sleep on a lap, there he goes again, falling asleep. He's just let the secret of it out and he's going to sleep. He just doesn't care anymore. She called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of hair. And so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. The 4th time now, Delilah calls out, verse 20, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he awoke from his sleep and thought, "I will go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know the Lord had left him. That's a sad verse, is it not? This is the superhero. This is Israel's superhero with incredible strength. And the Lord has left him. And he had no idea. No idea at all. I will say the English is a little bit deceiving here. God didn't actually leave him, because God is everywhere, right? God was still there. He just withdrew his power from Samson. He stopped using Samson. I would not like it if God stopped using me, because I've allowed something so insignificant, or what I thought was insignificant, just to be a thing that allowed the enemy to come through the gates to get to my life, and that I've got to a place where now I just don't see right and wrong. Like, this is what happened to him. The Lord stopped using him. Then the Philistines, verse 21, then the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes. Ouch. Ouch. That's, ouch. A little poetic though. What's the one thing that he did that got him into trouble to start with? He was looking at things he shouldn't have looked at. Last thing. So it's a little poetic. It's a little poetic. And they took Samson down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles, and set him grinding grain in a prison. This is the beginning of the end of his life. This is the superhero of Israel, not where he was supposed to be. His eyes gouged out, locked in prison with shackles, pushing around a big stone to crush grain underneath, and the Lord no longer using him. This is not the superhero Israel needed, and it's not the superhero that he should have been. The potential he lost in all of it is phenomenal. It all started because he looked and positioned himself in a place that wasn't right. Seemingly insignificant thing in his eyes had led down a whole path where he's now locked up in prison, pushing things with his eyes gouged out. I'll get the keys to come up and start playing for us. I'm wondering whether I should finish there or go on. Let me do one more verse. Let's do one more verse. Because I can't leave you here, because this is quite depressing, where he's ended up. Is it not? Come to church, we'll encourage you. See you later. Bye. This doesn't quite work, does it? Let's read the next verse. Verse 22. But Say but. Say it louder. Say it with some authority. Say but. Come on, say but like you know there's something just about to happen. Say but. Come on, one more time. Say but. But the hair on Samson's head began to grow again after it had been shaved. The hair on his head began to grow again. God had not left him. And his hair has started to grow back. His hair was, do you know what? This is a picture of God's mercy and God's grace. He had stuffed up to the point, right? Stuffed up to the point where God had stopped using him. His eyes were gouged out. He had become captive. He had just messed it all up completely, utterly, and totally. Locked in prison now. In Gaza, in prison, eyes out, pushing a stone to push grain. Probably the laughing stock of everyone there. My guess is they sold tickets and said, come and see Samson, the one who pulled the gates off the post. He's now our prisoner. But it says, but the hair on his head began to grow again. God can take someone who is stuffed up royally. God can take the one who has walked away from him. God can take the one who deliberately defied God and pushed him to the side and still do something with him. Because the hair on his head began to grow again. God had not left him. And today, I just want to encourage everyone that it doesn't matter where we end up. Because let's face it, you're all sinners. You're all jacked up. You've all stuffed up. You're all done wrong. I'm sorry, but you have. Me too. I'm not the best. I'm probably the worst of yous. But, the hair on his head began to grow back. Remember, every week I've been saying to you, when we are not faithful, he is still faithful. Yes, there's a consequence. His eyes get poked, like I don't want that to happen to me, but his eyes got gouged out. And he's locked up in prison. There's consequences to his mistakes, absolutely. But he is not too far gone that God can't get him. He's not too far away that God can't reach him. He's not too far where God can't save him. And the hair on his head began to grow back. Can I tell you that when we stuff up, we can come to God and go, God, I'm so sorry. And for some of us, it could be, oops, I've done it again. Come on, let's be honest. There are sins and there are things that we know of where we've gone, oops, I don't know what happened there, God. I know I didn't want to do it. And somehow my brain just woke up and I've done it again. Paul had that revelation. I can't stop doing the things, I want to do the things I do and can't stop doing the things I don't want to do. Remember that when Paul says that? Like we get this. Oops. But we could come to God and go, God, I'm so sorry. And there is nothing that you've done that will push you outside of his love or outside of his influence, outside of his presence. It just can't happen. It's not permission to do whatever you want, because there's always consequences. But how much easier would Samson's life have been if he didn't do that little insignificant act to start with? How much pain could he have stopped in his own life? We're going to sing a song. We'll get the band to come up. Because this is what we need to reflect on today. Is what are we allowing, what we think is insignificant to us, that actually God says no. Fix that. Because if you don't, the gates will be opened and the enemy will attack, because he will attack the weakest link. And as he attacks the weakest link, you're going to get down a path that's going to lead you to trouble. And you may end up in captivity of this. And we all know what it's like to be slaved to something. The words of the song in the second verse say this: I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and faults. Lord, you've seen them all. And you still call me friend. You still call me friend. Because the God of the mountains and the God of the valley, there's no place your mercy and your grace won't find me again. And maybe today you have sinned. Maybe you have allowed something little that's insignificant and you know that it's led you down a path. Maybe you're in there going, yeah, I understand the oops, I did it again. For your context. Maybe you're online watching this and this is you too. Who knows? But let's sing this song. And if God is speaking, then do business with him. Come before him and just go, God, I'm sorry. So we're going to sing this song, Graves into Gardens, because he can turn it all around if we allow him. And if God is speaking, you can stand where you are and you could cry out to him in your heart. You could sing with your lungs. You could do whatever you need to do. But if God is speaking, you can stand as we sing.